Hey guys, tonight we're taking a little historical detour. Not to the grand coliseums or the Senate halls, but right into the bustling, noisy, and often delightfully greasy heart of ancient Roman street life. Imagine this. You're trudging down a cobbled Roman street, the sun beating down, the sounds of merchants hawking their wares, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and then, the aroma. It's a complex bouquet of roasted meats, fermented fish sauce, fresh bread, and something vaguely garlicky. Your stomach rumbles, and your eyes dart around, seeking that familiar counter, that steaming pot, that quick fix. You probably won't survive this, because if you're like me, you'd be trying every single thing on offer. And let's be real, Roman sanitation wasn't exactly Michelin star standard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the heart of Rome, or perhaps Pompeii, a city teeming with life, much like any modern metropolis, but with its own unique rhythm. And at the very pulse of this rhythm, especially when it came to feeding the masses, were the thermopolia. Think of them as the ancient Roman equivalent of your favorite street food stall, a convenience store, and a bustling takeout joint all rolled into one. These weren't just scattered here and there. They were absolutely everywhere. You'd stumble upon them on almost every street corner, a vibrant, smoky beacon for anyone looking for a quick bite or a warm drink. The name Thermopolium itself gives you a big clue about what they were all about. It comes from Greek words meaning hot and sell. So literally a place that sold hot things. And hot things they did sell. These establishments were designed for efficiency. You'd see a large masonry counter, often U-shaped, facing the street, with embedded terracotta jars, or dolia, holding various foods and drinks. Some of these dolia were heated from below, keeping stews, soups, or mulled wine warm and ready for immediate consumption. It was the ultimate grab-and-go experience, millennia before the drive-thru was even a twinkle in Henry Ford's eye. Mainstream historical fact number 1 for tonight. Thermopolia were incredibly common in Roman cities, catering primarily to the lower and middle classes who often lacked cooking facilities in their own cramped apartments or insulae. It wasn't just a luxury for many, it was a necessity. Imagine living in a multi-story apartment block with no kitchen, maybe just a brazier if you were lucky. Cooking a full meal was a monumental effort, and often a fire hazard. So, stepping out to grab a hot meal from the Thermopolium was not just convenient. It was a fundamental part of daily life for a vast swath of the population. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, these thermopolia had rather suggestive frescoes painted on their walls, often depicting scenes of feasting or even more intimate activities. It's almost as if they were trying to set a certain vibe for their clientele beyond just the food. Historians still argue whether these images were purely decorative, advertisements for other services, or perhaps even subtle indicators of the kind of entertainment that might be available on the side. It definitely adds a layer of intrigue to your quick lunch stop, doesn't it? One minute you're thinking about a warm lentil stew, the next you're pondering the artistic merits of a rather explicit mural. Just typical Rome, really. Always keeping you on your toes. As you wander through the labyrinthine streets, the scent of the thermopolia drawing you closer, you begin to grasp just how integrated these establishments were into the fabric of Roman daily life. It wasn't just about grabbing a quick bite. It was about the rhythm of the city, the ebb and flow of its inhabitants. Imagine yourself waking up in a cramped insula, maybe a few floors up, the sounds of the street already filtering in. There's no kitchen. Your breakfast, if you even have one at home beyond some leftover bread, is probably meager. So, your first stop on the way to the forum, or to the baths, or to your workshop, might very well be the thermopolium. You'd step up to the counter, perhaps exchanging a few pleasantries with the proprietor, often a freedman or a woman making a living. You'd point to a steaming dolium, maybe a hearty pea or lentil stew, or perhaps some fresh bread dipped in olive oil. It was a rapid transaction, a quick fuel-up before the serious business of the day began. This wasn't a leisurely sit-down affair with linen napkins and multiple courses. This was efficiency, Roman style. You'd eat standing, perhaps leaning against the counter, or take your food with you as you continued your journey through the bustling streets. The typical Roman's day was structured around work, social obligations, and public life. They didn't have the modern concept of a long, drawn-out lunch break. Instead, meals were often lighter and more frequent. Breakfast, or intaculum, was usually simple, sometimes just bread and water, or wine. A midday meal, prandium, was the closest thing to lunch, and this is where the thermopolium truly shined. It offered a hot, often inexpensive, and quickly consumed meal that could be grabbed on the go. You'd pop in, get your fill, and be back to your duties without missing a beat. It was the original power lunch, just without the power suits and fancy expense accounts. More like power tunics and, well, not really expense accounts for most. Mainstream historical fact number 2. For many working-class Romans, especially those without private cooking facilities, thermopolia and similar establishments like Papani taverns that also served food were their primary source of cooked meals. This wasn't a choice for convenience. It was a fundamental necessity for survival in a densely populated urban environment. It highlights the stark reality of urban living for the majority of the population, a sharp contrast to the lavish banquets enjoyed by the Roman elite. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some thermopolia even had small rooms or alcoves attached, where patrons could sit and eat, or even gamble. These were often considered a bit rowdy, perhaps even a little disreputable, places where the common folk mingled, drank, and sometimes got into trouble. It's not hard to imagine the ancient Roman equivalent of a bar fight breaking out over a spilled cup of cheap wine or a disputed dice roll. It adds a certain colorful element to your historical imagination, doesn't it? Just picturing a couple of gladiators, off duty of course, arguing over who gets the last hot sausage. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of thermopolia actively discouraged home cooking among the lower classes, or if it simply arose as a practical solution to existing housing limitations. Was it a symptom of urban density, or did it in itself contribute to a culture of eating out? It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, isn't it? Either way, you, as a resident of ancient Rome, would find yourself relying on these places more often than not, embracing the speed and ease they offered. Having navigated the morning rush and grabbed your prandium from the thermopolium, you realize that at the heart of almost every Roman meal, whether homemade or bought on the street, was bread. It wasn't just a side dish. It was the foundation, the very staff of life. You'd see it everywhere. being carried in baskets by vendors, stacked high on bakery shelves, and of course being dunked into stews and sauces at the Thermopolia. The varieties of bread were astounding, reflecting the social strata of Roman society. For the wealthy, there was fine white bread, baked from carefully sifted flour, sometimes even flavored with honey or cheese. It was soft, delicate, a true luxury. But for the vast majority of Romans, like yourself, the bread was coarser, darker, made from less refined flour, often mixed with barley or other grains. This was the panis plebeius, the plebeian bread, or perhaps panis rusticus, rustic bread. It was dense, hearty, and designed to fill you up and provide sustained energy for a long day of labor. Imagine biting into a chunk of that rustic bread. It's probably still warm from the oven, perhaps a bit crumbly, with a robust, earthy flavor. You wouldn't find it wrapped in plastic. It would be sold as a whole loaf, often round and scored into wedges, making it easy to break off a piece. You might even see bakers selling bread emblazoned with their unique stamp, a sort of ancient brand identity. It was a tangible link to the agricultural backbone of the empire, a reminder that despite the bustling urban sprawl, the very sustenance of Rome depended on the wheat fields stretching across its vast territories. Mainstream historical fact number 3. The Roman state considered the provision of grain and bread to its citizens, particularly in Rome, a matter of paramount importance for maintaining social order. This was known as the annona, a system of public distribution, or subsidized sale of grain, which played a crucial role in preventing riots and ensuring the stability of the city. Essentially, free or cheap bread kept the populace happy and the emperors in power. It was a very effective strategy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, if you were really down on your luck, your bread might actually be more of a gruel. This was often made from boiled grains, sometimes with a little bit of pulse like lentils or chickpeas. It was the absolute cheapest way to get calories. Not exactly gourmet dining, but it kept you alive. So, while we often romanticize Roman feasts, for many, daily sustenance was a far more humble, porridge-like affair. You might even call it the original Roman smoothie, though perhaps a less palatable one. Historians still argue whether the quality of public bread rations consistently met the needs of the urban poor, or if there were frequent shortages and periods of extreme hardship despite the annona system. Was it truly a safety net, or more of a thin tightrope? You'd certainly hope it was a safety net, especially on those days when your purse felt lighter than a feather and your stomach felt emptier than a forgotten amphora. With a chunk of rustic bread in hand, perhaps still warm from the Thermopolium's ovens, your senses are next captivated by the pervasive, almost sacred presence of olive oil. It wasn't just a culinary ingredient. It was liquid gold, a multi-purpose marvel woven into every aspect of Roman life. You'd see it sold in amphorae of varying sizes at the market, poured from elegant cruets at elite dinner parties, and, crucially, drizzled liberally over dishes at your local street food stall. Think of it as the Roman equivalent of, well, everything. Need to cook? Olive oil. Need to dress your salad? Olive oil. Need to light your lamp? Olive oil. Need to moisturize your skin after a grueling session at the public baths? You guessed it. Olive oil. Often scented with various herbs and flowers. Its aroma, a mix of peppery and fruity notes, would cling to the air around any thermopolium, mingling with the other tantalizing smells. You'd see chefs liberally basting meats, or simply offering small bowls of it for customers to dip their bread. The quality of olive oil varied wildly, just like bread. There was the finest, first press oil, a delicate green, reserved for the wealthy and for special occasions. Then there were subsequent presses, coarser and more acidic, used for cooking or for industrial purposes. The oil used at your local thermopolium would likely be good, but certainly not the creme de la creme. It was functional, flavorful, and incredibly versatile. You might even carry a small flask of it yourself if you were particularly fond of it, perhaps to enhance a dry piece of bread or a bland dish. Mainstream historical fact number 4. The Roman Empire was a massive consumer and producer of olive oil, with vast olive groves spanning its territories, particularly in Hispania, modern-day Spain, and North Africa. The efficient production and distribution of olive oil were vital to the Roman economy, transported across the Mediterranean in specialized amphorae. You can even see enormous mounds of broken olive oil amphorae, like Monte Testaccio in Rome, which stands as a testament to the sheer volume of oil consumed in the city. Here's a quirky tidbit. Beyond its everyday uses, olive oil also played a significant role in religious rituals and athletic contests. Athletes would traditionally douse themselves in oil before exercise, and then scrape it off with a strigil, a curved metal tool, taking with it sweat and dirt. It was believed to cleanse and invigorate the body. So, if you were a particularly sweaty gladiator, your post-workout routine probably involved copious amounts of olive oil. Just imagine the slipperiness. Good luck holding on to your sword. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of olive oil as a primary fat source contributed to the overall health and longevity of the Roman population, or if its prevalence also led to other dietary imbalances. Was it truly a Mediterranean diet paradise, or were there hidden health pitfalls? You'd certainly feel the benefits of it, especially if you were engaged in a lot of manual labor, providing a dense source of energy and fat in your diet. As the sun climbs higher, and the olive oil has provided a satisfying richness to your bread, you might find yourself reaching for a drink. And in ancient Rome, the drink of choice, the omnipresent liquid companion to every meal and social gathering, was wine. Forget water, which was often of questionable purity unless drawn directly from an aqueduct. Wine was the default, the refreshment, and often the very glue of Roman society. You'd see it in elegant amphorae at the thermopolia, bubbling in large vats in taverns, and being served in modest earthenware cups to everyone from senators to slaves. Roman wine wasn't quite like what you might find on the shelves today. It was often incredibly potent, thick, and sometimes quite rough. To make it more palatable, it was almost universally diluted with water. This wasn't just a matter of taste. It was also a way to stretch supplies and make it last longer. You might even see a variety of flavorings added: honey, herbs, spices, and even seawater in some regions, though that last one sounds a bit adventurous. Imagine being offered a glass of lukewarm, watered-down wine flavored with pine resin. It certainly puts your usual supermarket plonk into perspective, doesn't it? At a thermopolium, you'd find wine readily available, usually from a large dolium embedded in the counter. It would be served in simple cups, ready to quench your thirst. It wasn't about savoring the nuances of a vintage. It was about hydration and, for many, a little buzz to take the edge off a long day. Wine was an integral part of your prandium, alongside your bread and stew, completing the simple, hearty meal. Mainstream historical fact number 5. Wine production was a cornerstone of the Roman agricultural economy, with vast vineyards cultivated across the empire. Italy itself, and later Gaul, modern-day France, and Hispania, became major wine-producing regions, exporting their vintages across the Mediterranean. The technology for viticulture and winemaking was highly developed, reflecting its importance in Roman society. Here's a quirky tidbit. The Romans were also quite fond of mulsum, a mixture of wine and honey, often served as an aperitif. It was a sweet, strong drink, a delightful contrast to the often acidic or bitter everyday wines. So, if you were feeling a bit fancy or celebrating a small victory, you might treat yourself to a cup of mulsum. Just picture yourself, a grizzled Roman, kicking back with a honey wine concoction after a hard day's honest toil. Probably not quite as relaxing as a modern cocktail, but it certainly did the trick. Historians still argue whether the widespread consumption of diluted wine actually provided a healthier alternative to often contaminated water sources, or if the sheer volume consumed still led to significant health issues, particularly related to lead poisoning from lead-lined vessels used in some areas. Was it a public health benefit or a silent killer? You'd probably just be glad for the hydration and the gentle warmth spreading through you after a few sips, not pondering the long-term health implications. With your thirst quenched by diluted wine, you might now notice a rather pungent, distinctive aroma wafting from one of the dolia at the thermopolium, perhaps mixed with the more pleasant smells of cooking meat. This, my friend, is garum, the ubiquitous, intensely flavored, and surprisingly expensive fish sauce that was the absolute darling of Roman cuisine. You'd encounter it everywhere, from the humblest street food to the most elaborate banquets. It was the salt, the umami bomb, the flavor enhancer of choice for virtually every dish. Garum was essentially a fermented fish sauce, made by layering fish, often small, oily fish, like anchovies or mackerel, with salt, and then leaving the mixture to ferment in the sun for weeks or even months. The resulting liquid, strained from the solids, was garum. It came in various grades, from the finest liquamen, a clear amber liquid, to the coarser alec, which contained the actual solid bits of fish. Imagine the smell of a heavily salted fish market, then magnify it tenfold and let it sit in the sun for a while. Yeah, it was that kind of smell. And yet, Romans absolutely adored it. Your modern nose might recoil, but to a Roman, it was pure culinary gold. You'd see small amphorae of garum on every table in a Roman household, just like we have salt and pepper shakers. At the thermopolium, it would be offered alongside other condiments, perhaps a small jug or a communal bowl. You'd drizzle it over your bread, mix it into your stew, or use it to flavor your roasted meats. It provided a salty, savory kick that elevated even the simplest of dishes. It was the ancient Roman equivalent of ketchup, soy sauce, and Worcestershire sauce all rolled into one pungent package. Mainstream historical fact number 6. The production of garum was a massive industry in the Roman Empire, particularly along the coasts of Hispania and North Africa. Large-scale factories, often with enormous vats for fermentation, were dedicated solely to its manufacture. The garum produced in places like Lusitania, modern-day Portugal, was highly prized and traded across the entire Roman world, much like a luxury commodity today. Here's a quirky tidbit. Pliny the Elder, a Roman author and naturalist, described garum sociorum, a particularly prized type of garum, as being so valuable that a small bottle of it could cost as much as 1,000 sestertii, an astronomical sum, equivalent to the daily wages of many laborers for months. Imagine paying hundreds of dollars for a bottle of fish sauce. It really makes you appreciate the cost of your modern condiments, doesn't it? Though, hopefully, yours don't smell quite so historically authentic. Historians still argue whether the high sodium content of garum, combined with other salty Roman foods, had a significant impact on Roman health, particularly contributing to issues like hypertension or kidney problems. Was it a delicious addition or a silent contributor to ailments? You, of course, would just be enjoying the burst of flavor it added to your otherwise simple meal, completely oblivious to any potential long-term consequences. Having experienced the potent magic of garum, you might start to wonder what else those steaming dolia in the thermopolium counter held. Beyond the foundational bread, olive oil, wine, and fish sauce, Roman street food offered a surprisingly diverse menu, catering to a range of tastes and hunger levels. You weren't limited to just a basic stew. There were savory delights and quick bites designed to tempt your senses and fill your stomach. Imagine peering into those large, built-in pots. You'd likely see various kinds of stews and porridges, often made from pulses like lentils, chickpeas, or fava beans, cooked with vegetables, herbs, and perhaps some meat scraps for flavor. These were hearty, warming, and inexpensive, perfect for a cold Roman morning or a quick midday refuel. They were the ultimate comfort food, Roman style. You might even catch the scent of simmering cabbage or leeks, a surprisingly familiar aroma even across 2 millennia. Beyond the stews, a popular item would have been sausages, often grilled or fried right there on the spot. Romans were big on sausages, concocting them from various meats like pork, beef, or even fish, mixed with herbs and spices. Imagine the sizzle, the smoke, the inviting smell of fatty meat cooking over an open flame. You'd probably get it served on a piece of bread, a true ancient hot dog, but perhaps with more distinct spices. They even had a type of blood sausage, which, while not for everyone, was certainly a high-energy option. Mainstream historical fact number 7. Archaeological excavations, particularly in Pompeii, have revealed detailed frescoes and actual remains of food in Thermopolia, providing invaluable insights into their menus. The Thermopolium of Reggio V in Pompeii, famously excavated in 2020, yielded clear evidence of ducks, chickens, goats, fish, and even snails on the menu, showcasing a varied diet for the common Roman. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans also enjoyed various types of fried dough, not unlike modern donuts or fritters. These could be savory, perhaps seasoned with garum, or sweet, drizzled with honey, and sprinkled with poppy seeds. Imagine a warm, crispy fritter, a delightful treat on a chilly day. It's comforting to know that the human craving for something sweet and deep-fried transcends time, isn't it? It proves that some things, like the joy of a good fried snack, are truly universal. Just try not to get too much olive oil on your toga. Historians still argue whether the dietary diversity available at Thermopolia was sufficient to provide a balanced diet for the urban poor, or if reliance on these establishments often led to nutritional deficiencies over time due to a lack of fresh produce or varied protein sources. Was it genuinely nutritious, or just filling? You'd certainly be grateful for the options, though. especially when faced with an empty stomach and a long day ahead. As you savor that ancient sausage or fritter, you can't help but notice the constant interplay of social status in the Roman street scene, even around something as seemingly democratic as street food. While the thermopolia were indeed the domain of the common people, there were subtle and not so subtle distinctions in what and where Romans of different classes chose to eat. You might be rubbing shoulders with a freedman, a craftsman, or even a legionary, but a senator? Not so much. For the Roman elite, the concept of eating out at a public establishment like a thermopolium was generally considered unseemly, even vulgar. Their meals were almost exclusively consumed at home, prepared by their enslaved cooks, or enjoyed at lavish private banquets with their peers. Dining for them was a performative art, a display of wealth, power, and refined taste. Imagine a modern CEO choosing to eat every meal at a fast food drive-thru, or never stepping foot in a high-end restaurant. That's roughly the social equivalent. They'd send their slaves to fetch specific ingredients, perhaps, but they wouldn't be seen jostling at a counter for a hot bowl of lentil stew. However, the lines weren't always perfectly rigid. While the elite didn't frequent thermopolia for their daily sustenance, they might occasionally pass by, perhaps even send a slave to purchase a specific exotic item if it were available and unique. But for you, the average Roman, the thermopolium was your culinary lifeline. It was a place of social interaction, a melting pot where news was exchanged, and the daily grind was temporarily eased by a hot meal and a shared moment. It represented the vibrant, dynamic pulse of urban life, inaccessible and perhaps even unappealing to those at the very top of the social hierarchy. Mainstream historical fact number 8. While thermopolia primarily served the lower and middle classes, some more upscale versions, or popinae that offered a slightly more refined dining experience, might have catered to less strict members of the equestrian order or wealthy freedmen. Still, the truly elite preferred private dining within their domus or villas. Here's a quirky tidbit. Even within the thermopolia themselves, there could be subtle cues about social status. For instance, the quality of the drinking cups might vary, or the type of seating, if any, was available. While most patrons ate standing or on the go, some establishments might have had a few stools or benches. The rougher, more common thermopolia might use plain earthenware or even wooden vessels, while a slightly fancier one might offer better quality pottery. It's like the difference between a high-end coffee shop and a humble street vendor. Both serve coffee, but the experience and the perceived status are different. Historians still argue whether the distinct culinary habits between social classes were primarily driven by economic necessity, or if they were also deeply ingrained cultural practices and expressions of identity. Was it just about money? Or was it also about reinforcing social boundaries through dining rituals? You, as an everyday Roman, wouldn't be overthinking it. You'd just be happy to have a warm meal, regardless of who else wasn't eating it with you. As you stand at the thermopolium, enjoying your simple meal, you can't help but notice that Roman urban life, while vibrant, was also a sensory overload, and not always in a good way. The delicious smells of cooking food mingled with other, less appealing aromas, and the concept of public hygiene, health, and hazards was, shall we say, a work in progress. You're definitely not in a sterile, climate-controlled modern kitchen here. Imagine the waste, food scraps, animal droppings from the carts and pack animals, and the general refuse of a densely packed city. While some Roman cities had impressive sewer systems for public latrines and bathhouses, waste disposal for individual households and street vendors was often rudimentary. You might see open drains or just people tossing things into the street. It definitely adds a certain rustic charm to your dining experience, doesn't it? Just try not to think about what that particular puddle is made of. Food preparation at the Thermopolia, while generally aiming for speed and efficiency, wasn't always conducted with what we'd consider modern sanitary practices. Hands might not be washed as frequently as ideal, and ingredients could be exposed to the elements or to less than pristine surfaces. The use of fermented products like garum and the high salt content in much of the food probably helped with preservation, but foodborne illnesses were certainly a risk. You'd have to trust that the heat from the dolia was doing its job, or perhaps just develop a very robust Roman immune system. Mainstream historical fact number 9. Despite impressive engineering feats like aqueducts that brought fresh water into cities, Roman public health infrastructure for waste management and sanitation was uneven. While public baths and latrines were common, general street hygiene and food safety standards were far below modern expectations, contributing to the frequent spread of disease. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Roman medical texts actually recommend eating specific foods, or avoiding others, based on their perceived humors and effects on the body, rather than on a germ theory of disease. For instance, cold foods might be advised for a fever, or hot foods for chills. So if you got a stomach bug from that questionable sausage, a Roman physician might prescribe you a nice warm bowl of, well, probably something else equally unlikely to help. It certainly makes you appreciate modern medicine, doesn't it? Though a warm bowl of anything often feels comforting when you're feeling ill. Historians still argue whether the constant exposure to various pathogens in Roman urban environments led to a population with generally stronger natural immunities, or if the high rates of infant mortality and disease simply reflected a constant struggle against overwhelming health challenges. Was it a form of ancient natural selection, or just a brutal reality? You, as a street-level observer, would just be trying to avoid stepping in anything too unpleasant while enjoying your surprisingly delicious, if slightly risky, meal. The aromas, both delightful and decidedly not, are only part of the experience. As you stand by the Thermopolium, the very air around you is a symphony, or perhaps a cacophony, of the sounds and smells of ancient Roman urban life. It's a multi-sensory immersion that would overwhelm your modern sensibilities, but to a Roman like you, it's just Tuesday. The constant hum of voices is ever present. Merchants shouting their wares, customers haggling over prices, children playing in the alleyways, and the distant rumble of carts on the cobblestones. You'd hear snippets of Latin, Greek, and perhaps other languages from traders passing through. Then there's the distinctive sizzle of meat hitting a hot griddle from a nearby stall, the rhythmic pounding from a blacksmith shop, and the distant echoing cheers from the amphitheater if games are on. It's a living, breathing soundscape, full of energy and purpose. And the smells, oh, the smells. Beyond the delicious waft of roasting pork or fresh bread, there's the pungent tang of garum, the earthy scent of damp soil, the sweet aroma of flowers from a vendor, and the acrid smoke from countless braziers and cooking fires. Underneath it all, the ever-present, less pleasant odors of human and animal waste, unwashed bodies, and stagnant water would occasionally cut through. It's a raw, unfiltered olfactory experience that reminds you how much our modern world has sanitized everyday life. You'd certainly appreciate a good public bath after spending a day immersed in that sensory buffet. Mainstream historical fact number 10. Roman cities, particularly Rome itself, were incredibly noisy and crowded places. Strict laws were even enacted to try and mitigate the racket, such as banning wheeled traffic in the city center during certain hours, primarily due to the constant clamor of carts and wagons. Despite this, the urban environment remained a sensory assault. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some wealthier Romans would carry perfumed handkerchiefs or even small sachets of fragrant herbs to combat the less desirable odors of the city. Imagine strolling through the Forum, casually holding a little bundle of lavender to your nose to ward off the smell of, say, a particularly ripe fish market. It's a very ancient form of personal air freshener, isn't it? Though I suspect the effectiveness was somewhat limited. Historians still argue whether the high population density and constant sensory stimulation of Roman cities contributed to unique forms of social stress or mental health challenges, or if Romans simply adapted to it as their normal way of life. Was it a constant source of agitation or simply background noise? You, trying to enjoy your hot meal, would likely just filter out the worst of it, focusing on the immediate pleasure of the food, even if it meant tuning out the donkey braying directly behind you. Stepping back from the immediate sensory bombardment of the Roman street, you begin to appreciate how much of our understanding of these ancient street food hubs comes from remarkable archaeological discoveries, especially in a place frozen in time like Pompeii. It's not just imagining, it's seeing, almost touching, the remnants of these vibrant establishments. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it buried Pompeii, Herculaneum, and other settlements under layers of ash and pumice. While tragic for its inhabitants, this catastrophic event preserved an unparalleled snapshot of Roman daily life, including its food culture. You can walk through the streets of Pompeii today and see thermopolia almost exactly as they were nearly 2 millennia ago. The U-shaped counters, the dolia still embedded in them, the frescoes on the walls. It's all there. It's like a perfectly preserved stage set, just waiting for the actors to return. These excavations have provided irrefutable evidence of the types of food sold, the structure of the establishments, and even the clientele they served. In some dolia, archaeologists have found residues of the very food that was being prepared or stored, offering direct insights into the Roman diet. Imagine finding carbonized lentils or traces of fish bones in a pot. It's like finding a half-eaten sandwich on your kitchen counter, but 2,000 years later. Mainstream historical fact number 11. The archaeological site of Pompeii is arguably the most significant source of information for understanding Roman daily life, including its fast food culture. The remarkably preserved thermopolia there, complete with their counters, cooking vessels, and even wall paintings, offer direct evidence of how these establishments operated and what they sold. Here's a quirky tidbit. In the recently fully excavated thermopolium of Reggio V in Pompeii, archaeologists discovered detailed frescoes depicting animals that were on the menu, including a rooster and 2 ducks. They also found traces of pork, goat, fish, and even snails. It's like an ancient Roman menu board, except painted directly onto the wall, giving you a very literal glimpse into the culinary offerings. Imagine choosing your dinner by pointing at a painting of a snail. Yes, I'll have the roasted snail, please, extra garum. Historians still argue whether the Pompeian thermopolia are fully representative of all Roman street food establishments across the empire, or if they offer a unique regional variation influenced by local customs and available ingredients. Are they a universal blueprint or a localized specialty? You, standing amidst the ruins, would simply be awestruck by the sheer immediacy of the past, the feeling that the last customer just left and the proprietor might return at any moment. Having explored the bustling, often chaotic world of urban Roman street food, your mind might naturally drift to how different life, and indeed food, must have been beyond the city walls. The Roman Empire wasn't just its sprawling metropolises. It was also vast tracts of farmland, small villages, and isolated villas. So, how did the rural versus urban eating habits compare? You'd find a stark contrast, not just in availability, but in the very rhythm of life. In the countryside, the convenience of the thermopolium simply didn't exist. There were no street corners teeming with vendors offering hot meals on demand. Life revolved around agriculture, and so did the diet. You, as a rural Roman, would eat what you grew or what you could forage. Meals would be prepared at home, often in a simple hearth, with ingredients that were fresh, seasonal, and local. Your diet would be far more reliant on grains, legumes, vegetables, and whatever livestock or poultry you kept. Meat would be less frequent, often reserved for special occasions or when an animal was culled. Imagine the deep satisfaction of eating bread made from wheat you harvested yourself, or stew with vegetables from your own garden. It was a more self-sufficient, perhaps healthier, but certainly more labor-intensive way of life. The fast pace of urban dining would be completely alien here. Meals were slower, communal, and directly linked to the cycles of nature. You wouldn't be grabbing a quick sausage. You'd be sitting down with your family, sharing a meal that was the culmination of your day's work. Mainstream historical fact. Number 12. The vast majority of the Roman Empire's population lived in rural areas and worked in agriculture. Their diet was predominantly plant-based, consisting of grains, wheat and barley, legumes, lentils, chickpeas, vegetables, and fruits. Meat was less common than for urban dwellers, who had more access to markets and public eateries. Here's a quirky tidbit. While urban Romans relied on public bakeries and thermopolia, rural households almost invariably had their own ovens or hearths for baking bread. Imagine the comforting smell of fresh bread baking in a stone oven. A truly foundational aroma of rural life. It's a far cry from the hurried transaction at a city counter, a testament to the fundamental difference in lifestyle. You might even argue that the bread from a rural hearth had more character, more soul. Historians still argue whether the perceived healthiness of a rural Roman diet, with its fresh, whole foods, genuinely led to better long-term health outcomes compared to the more varied, but potentially less sanitary urban diet. Was rural life inherently healthier? Or did the physical demands and lack of medical access in the countryside negate some of those benefits? You, chopping firewood for your oven, would probably just be hoping for a good harvest and enough food to last through the winter. Comparing the bustling city of Thermopolia with the self-sufficient hearths of the countryside, you can easily be transported to the present day. It's interesting to think about how ancient Roman eating habits, particularly their approach to fast and affordable food, have left a subtle but undeniable mark on modern cuisine. You may not realize it, but you're probably eating something today that has a direct, if sometimes roundabout, connection to those cobblestone streets of Rome. Think about it. The concept of a quick, ready-to-eat meal, available on the go. That's essentially what Thermopolia offered, and it's the very foundation of modern fast food. We've just traded the dolly for warming trays and the open counter for a takeout window. The basic human desire for convenience, for a hot meal when you're busy, is timeless. Want a sausage on a bun? The Romans had sausage on bread. Fancy a warm bowl of soup or stew? They had that too. And the specific ingredients? While garum may not be a household name, although fish sauce is very common in many Asian cuisines today, the widespread use of olive oil, bread, and wine as staples certainly persists in Mediterranean and European cooking. Many modern Italian dishes, for example, can trace their origins to simpler Roman cuisine, which evolved over the centuries but retained its core reliance on fresh, local ingredients and simple, rich flavors. Even the concept of pizza, while evolving far beyond its Roman ancestors, shares a commonality with ancient flatbreads topped with various toppings. Key historical fact number 13. Many of the key ingredients and cooking techniques of ancient Roman cuisine, such as the heavy reliance on grains, olive oil, and the use of fermented sauces, directly or indirectly influenced the development of Mediterranean diets and European culinary traditions that continue to shape world cuisine. Here's a strangely interesting fact. The Roman love of stuffed pastries or savory pies, often filled with meat or vegetables, can be seen as an early precursor to things like Cornish pasties or even modern savory pies. Imagine picking up a small hot serving of meat and vegetables from a street vendor in ancient Rome. It's a concept that has truly stood the test of time. You'd probably find it just as satisfying today as a Roman 2 millennia ago. Historians still debate whether the direct transmission of certain recipes from Roman times is less important than the broader cultural heritage of eating habits and ingredient preferences. Is it a direct line or a more diffuse influence? As you contemplate your latest takeaway, you might just smile at the thought of participating in a culinary tradition that is surprisingly delicious and ancient. After considering the enduring legacy of Roman street food, you might find yourself wondering about the eventual fate of these ubiquitous thermopolia. Did they simply vanish overnight, or did they slowly fade away, replaced by new culinary trends or societal shifts? The story of the thermopolium's decline isn't a dramatic one, but rather a gradual evolution tied to broader changes within the Roman Empire. As the Roman Empire entered its later periods and eventually transitioned into the early medieval era, significant societal changes began to take hold. Urban populations, particularly in the West, often decreased. The sprawling, densely packed cities that had necessitated the thermopolia began to shrink. People moved to more rural areas. Or if they remained in cities, the nature of urban living changed. The complex supply chains that brought exotic ingredients and sustained large-scale food production might have become less reliable in some regions due to political instability or economic decline. Furthermore, the very concept of dining began to shift. While communal eating remained important, the specialized, quick-service nature of the thermopolium might have given way to more domestic cooking for those who could afford it, or simpler, less specialized taverns. The emphasis on convenience, born out of the bustling, often kitchenless insulae, might have lessened as urban demographics changed and housing arrangements evolved. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow dimming of the lights, as the needs of the populace subtly but profoundly changed. Mainstream historical fact number 14. The prominence of thermopolia and other public eateries likely declined in the later Roman Empire, especially in the West, as urban populations decreased and the economic and social structures that supported these establishments transformed. This transition was gradual and varied by region. Here's a quirky tidbit. While the formal thermopolium, as we recognize it from Pompeii, largely disappeared, the basic concept of a public house serving food and drink certainly persisted in various forms throughout the medieval period and beyond. Think of medieval inns and taverns, which offered travelers and locals alike a place to eat and drink. So, the spirit of the thermopolium lived on, just in different guises, like an old friend who changes their outfit but keeps their core personality. Historians still argue whether the decline of the thermopolium was a direct consequence of the broader economic and social collapse of the Western Roman Empire, or if it was simply an organic evolution of food service adapting to new needs and tastes. Was it a casualty of chaos, or a natural progression? You, watching the last wisps of smoke curl from a doleum on a darkening Roman street, might feel a pang of nostalgia for an era of simple, hearty, and readily available street food, even if you're heading home to a much more spacious and private kitchen. So, as we conclude our journey through the hot, bustling streets of ancient Rome, you are acutely aware of how deeply ingrained street food was in their daily lives. The specific thermopolia may have disappeared from the urban landscape, replaced by later forms of catering and public catering, but the fundamental human desire for quick and affordable food, the enduring appeal of convenience, remains as strong today as it did 2 millennia ago. Think about it. Whether it's a hot dog stand in New York, a taco truck in Los Angeles, a banh mi vendor in Hanoi, or a dumpling stand in Kiev, the principle is the same. We crave instant gratification, a satisfying bite that fits into the rhythm of our busy lives. The Roman thermopolia was an original response to this universal need. It wasn't about fine dining. It was about nutrition, speed, and accessibility. He democratized food, making hot, ready-to-eat meals accessible to everyone, regardless of their social status or the availability of a kitchen in their cramped apartment. The legacy is not just the vague notion of fast food, but also the enduring importance of simple, hearty ingredients. Bread as a staple, olive oil as a versatile fat, legumes and grains as fillers, and the ubiquitous ability to grab something warm on the go. These elements continue to define much of what we consider comfort food, or simply good food in many cultures around the world. We still value the sizzle, the aroma, and the instant gratification of a meal prepared and served right before our eyes. Key historical fact number 15. The human need for convenient, affordable, and easily accessible food has been a constant throughout history, adapting to various social structures and technological advances, from the Roman thermopolia to today's food trucks and fast food chains. Here's a strange and interesting fact. While the Romans didn't have apps for ordering food, some thermopolia in Pompeii had primitive menus painted on the walls or carved into stone indicating their offerings. It's almost like an ancient QR code if you squint hard enough and use a lot of imagination. So the desire to quickly get information about what's on offer is as old as the desire for food itself. Historians still debate whether thermopolia ultimately contributed to the decline of traditional home cooking, or simply filled a necessary gap created by urban living. Was it a symptom of a changing habit, or a catalyst? As you sit back now, feeling the comfortable weight of history weigh you down, you may realize that the desire to satisfy hunger quickly and efficiently is truly an eternal part of the human experience. The sun begins to sink below the horizon, casting long, peaceful shadows on the ancient streets we have explored tonight. The sounds of the bustling city fade away, replaced by a gentle silence. Those bustling thermopolia, once vibrant centers of Roman life, are now mere whispers in the historical record, but their spirit, that simple comfort of a warm meal on the go, continues to resonate through time. Close your eyes, allow the soft hum of a fan, or perhaps the distant sound of the night, to lull you into a state of rest. The smells of Roman street food have faded, replaced by the peace of your own home. Rest easy, knowing that even in ancient times, a good night's sleep often followed a hearty, if simple, meal. Sweet dreams